Good morning, Guidance 3, and welcome to our lesson for targeting. We're also going to be talking about values today, so there's going to be like two different lectures in today's lesson. It's not going to be too much, but it was the only way that I can make sure that I can get everything crammed in the 8 weeks that we have together. First of all, let me say thank you all for being flexible. Um, it was a little bit jarring to me as well to hear that the campus has been flooded so poorly that we can't even be on campus. But I really want to thank you guys for pivoting and being flexible today. And I wanted to make sure that I still got this information to you because I think the information is still super important, super pertinent. And as you know, this being a fast track class, we just don't have a ton of time together. So we really got to make sure that we get all that information in a short period of time. Um, Let me also say I really appreciate all of the work that you have been doing and the level of insight and the level of detail that you all are putting into your reflections. Your MBTI and your strong reflections were incredible. Um, Truthfully, it was like a joy to read them. The way you all are making the connections, not only between the MBTI and the strong, and finding like the points of overlap are incredible, but also the way you all are challenging the results that you're getting. We kind of mentioned this before in previous lectures, but sometimes what happens when you read these assessments is that you're like, well, somebody that knows more about this than I do said that this is how it is, and so maybe this is how it is. And all of you have done a really great job in just terms of like challenging the information that you're getting and being like, you know what, I get that this is what it says, but this doesn't really reflect me. Um, and finding the points, the pieces of value to pull out from there, and the things that you don't necessarily need. You all are doing a really great job. And it's really been a joy to read your reflection. So please keep up the good work. I told you that things are speeding up. Today we're going to talk about networking. We're going to go over that informational interview that you all need to do for your last assignment for the class. Keep in mind that this is not due until the very end of class, right? So this isn't due until our last week of class, which I think is the week of the 17th. So you have plenty of time, but let's not wait too long, right? For you perceivers out there, let's not wait too long because I promise you that those dates will catch up. Um, and the hardest part about this is finding somebody to interview. The actual writing of the work is not a big deal, but the hardest part is finding somebody to interview. So let's make sure that we are ahead of the game, that we are, behind the 8 ball. All of those cliche sayings that I just said to you. Let's make sure we do all those things. We dot our I's and we cross our T's, so we can get this work done, okay? Super important. Okay, so let's get into it for today. We're going to talk a little bit about networking. What is networking? If we were in class, I would leave a bunch of room here and get all of your wonderful responses. But for the sake of today, we're going to get into it to make sure that I can be mindful of your time. Now, one thing I want to talk about networking is some of the ways in which it can be uncomfortable. Networking is really just about using your social, your personal, and your professional circle or your professional contacts to help you learn more about a different major or career, right? Using the people around you, your professors, your family members, your friends, to kind of get information about a particular career or particular major, or maybe just something that you're interested in. Sometimes networking can feel disingenuous, right? If any of you have ever been to like a networking event, I know that I've been to a few when I was a little younger, and I found them to be really disingenuous, and I just felt like a dirty liar the whole time, right? Like you're trying to be somebody you're not. Like, hi, I'm Brent McLaren, and I'm right? Instead of like having the opportunity to be a little bit more comfortable and be yourself. And so I think when we frame networking like this, in terms of saying that we're just using the folks that are around you, it takes away some of that fakeness, some of that disingenuousness, some of that. So I know I used to feel like I'm using somebody, and that didn't feel good. It didn't make me feel very good. So I think when we frame it like this, using our social, our personal, our professional circle to just give us some help, right? To guide us a little bit, to ask some questions, it makes it feel a little less icky, right? Um, and developing and maintaining those contacts or those relationships as you go through your educational career, as you go through your professional career. Okay. So really what I want us to think about networking is using the folks that are around you. You don't have to go to a networking event or a Toastmakers event to make these relationships. You already have them. It's about leveraging and maintaining those relationships that you already have so that you can learn something from them. Okay, super important distinction. I think it's a lot different than how we are normally conditioned to think about networking. Okay. There's also some myths about networking, in my opinion. Things that I've seen kind of as somebody that was a networker and still a networker to some extent. But surely when I was coming up in college, some of the things that I felt about networking and that my peer group thought about networking, that just kind of I learned as I got older weren't necessarily true. Okay. The first is you need to have business cards in order to network effectively, right? When you think of networking, you think like, you're dressed professionally, you got a set of business cards, in your breast pocket, and you're like, here you go. Don't text me, call me, right? That kind of nonsense. Not necessarily true. There's all types of different ways to network without using business cards, okay? Sometimes students feel or people feel like they already need to have a job or a career in order to network effectively, right? I think when we think about networking, we're like, I want to be a nurse. Let me go and speak to a nurse about it, right? But that's not necessarily true. If you're unsure about your major, if you're unsure about your career, you can still develop those relationships and network to learn about something. So even if you're not sure about what you want to do for a job or for a career or for a major, we can still leverage those relationships to learn, right? So it's not necessarily true that you have to have a job or a career in order to be able to network effectively or to feel like you know what you're talking about. Okay, tying it back to the MBTI that we've obviously done in this class, networking is only for extroverts, right? We think of networking as shaking hands, mingling, rubbing elbows a little bit, right? And it can be that. It doesn't necessarily always have to be, but it can be that. But I know lots of us, especially with the with the growing use of social media in terms of Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook, people are finding ways to connect with others through screens. And so for some of us that have that preference for introversion, even though we can flex back to extroversion, that might be a more comfortable way for us to network. And it's absolutely just as effective as being in person, being extroverted, and trying to build those connections that way. Okay. So it's not necessarily just for extroverts. Okay. There's all kinds of ways that people who have a preference for introversion can still network effectively. Okay. You can't see all of this here because my face is in the way, but sometimes we think that we don't want to bug people with my questions, and that says inquiries behind that, right? We don't want to bug people. I told you all before in this class, people love talking about themselves, right? I feel like I've just done that for like 3 minutes in this presentation alone. People like talking about themselves. They like talking about how they got where they got to, because normally they don't get that chance because they're also networking, listening to other folks, right? So I promise you that you are not bugging anybody. Most folks have no problem paying it forward and giving you whatever information or knowledge or guidance that they can so that maybe you do something similar to what they did, or conversely, you don't make the same mistakes that they did, right? Good chance that their path there wasn't a linear one. Their path to whatever successful career they got to wasn't an easy one. And they'll probably want to share some of the obstacles that they face and the ways in which they've navigated those obstacles. Okay, so I promise you all, you are not bugging anybody. Okay, and then last but surely not least, employers always choose the most qualified candidate. You can't see it again because my dome is in front of it. So networking is not important. Employers always choose the most qualified candidate. So what does it matter? What does it matter who I know or what they know or where they work? If I am the most qualified candidate, I'm going to get the job. And I promise you all that is not necessarily true. You never know what kind of situation you're walking into when you're going into an interview or you're going into a space where you need to compete for an opportunity, right? And all kinds of nefarious stuff can happen. Okay, all kinds of backdoor deals that you are not privy to because you are not in that establishment, you're not in the institution. That's not always necessarily true. Sometimes it really is about who you know and what they know. Okay, let's keep it moving. Conversely, those were the myths about networking. Let's talk about some of the things that we know to be factual about networking. Okay, oftentimes networking happens without you knowing it. This is absolutely true. Every time that we walk into Worgen Hall together and you all say good morning, and then you leave saying goodbye, that's networking. That's you and I building and maintaining and developing our professional relationship together. Every time you walk into a classroom and you say good morning to your professor, you ask a question at the break, you ask a question after class, you show up to office hours and ask a question, even if you don't actually have a question, but you're just like, hey, that lesson was really cool. Can we talk a little bit more about that? All of that is building and maintaining that relationship with that professor and thus building your network. Every single time that you engage with anybody on this campus, and you do that repeatedly, you're networking. So this often happens without us even trying, right? So for those of you who are a little bit maybe more hesitant or maybe more reserved in terms of wanting to step out and network, know that you're already doing it. You're already doing this work and you can continue to do this work, okay? So I mentioned this already. If you're visiting with your office hours with your professor, that is absolutely a form of networking. Okay. If you are sitting down with a family friend and asking them about your career, right? Maybe you all are at a barbecue or you're having dinner or something. You run into somebody that may be doing something in an occupational arena that is kind of adjacent to what you're thinking of. And you're just like, hey, how do you like teaching? Tell me a little bit about it. Why did you decide to start teaching? Oh, really? That's cool. How did you get there? Right? What are some things that are happening in the industry that are changing that I should know about on the front end? All of those conversations while you're eating barbecue, unless you're a vegetarian, but I guess you could still like have a barbecued cauliflower steak. I don't know. But all of those conversations are networking. Okay. All of that is networking. Okay. The other things that are true about networking is that there's a good opportunity for this to lead to some type of job or some type of internship, right? When you are sitting there at the barbecue eating your cauliflower steak, and you're asking somebody about their position, right? What their career is, what they're doing, how they got there, what obstacles they faced. What's also happening is they're sitting there being like, wow, this young person is really engaging. This young professional is really trying to learn something about this. And when an opportunity arises at their employer for a job or for an opportunity or for an entry level internship or something like that, they're going to be like, hey, remember that young person I was talking to at the barbecue? They were really engaging. They seemed like they really had their head on straight. Let me maybe reach out to them. This happens all the time. Okay. People enjoy talking about themselves. Right? We mentioned this on the previous slide. So don't be nervous about asking people questions. No one's going to be like, who is this weirdo who's eating cauliflower steak asking me all these questions at this barbecue? They're going to be like, yeah, let's talk about it. How can I coach you up? How can I guide you? Right? Absolutely. And like I mentioned previously on the other slide, networking can be done completely online. Okay. You can do it completely online. I think especially since the pandemic, where people have gotten more and more comfortable interacting online in spaces like this, on Zoom, so on and so forth. You have an opportunity to maybe speak to and interview somebody in 3, 4 states away that you would never otherwise have an opportunity to talk to and get to learn about what it's like to do what they do over there. For some of you that might think that you want to move out of California, having an opportunity to maybe interview somebody in the state that you're thinking about going to, hey, look, how is the career different over there than it is over here? What are some of the legal matters that I have to be mindful of over there to make sure that I can make a sound decision about whether or not that's really where I want to practice or really where I want to conduct my work, right? Super important. And lastly, but not leastly, almost 80% of all jobs are landed from networking. Almost 80% of all jobs are landed from networking, right? Now, that doesn't mean that the networking is going to be somebody that tells you, hey, I know exactly how to get you into this job. But they might call you and say, hey, there's an opening. You might want to apply, right? And you building the foundation of those relationships and building that network is going to help you know about those opportunities that you otherwise might not know about, okay? So it's super important, super, super important, okay? We've talked about networking. We've talked about, some of the myths, some of the things that are true. How do you start? Where do we start networking? And we kind of talked about this. Start with the people that you're comfortable with, right? Start with the people that are in your immediate circle right now. We all have them, right? They might be helpful to different extents, but we all have folks in our circle that we can ask, right? So let's start with a family member that might be involved in a field or career that you have interest in, right? Let's get our feet wet. Let's work out the kinks. right? We don't have to go right to the CEO of a company. We can start close, build our confidence in terms of asking questions, figure out what questions we want to ask so that when we're asking these questions, we're really being mindful about how we are using that person's time. Okay. You can also use your professors. We have mentioned it in class before. Most of the professors that you have at Chaffey College or throughout your entire academic career have done something else before they taught, right? Your business law professors were all lawyers, right? Your business entrepreneurship classes, most of those folks have their own business, right? The nursing instructors are nurses. Imagine having a nursing instructor who was never a nurse telling you how to nurse, right? When you're in the child development classes and you're taking elementary teacher education classes, they've taught before. So use your professors, use professionals. If they're serving as your mentors, use them. Also your peers. Some of you in this class might have family members that are working in areas that can help somebody else. So make relationships in class. Speak to somebody in class, right? The person on the left or right of you in our class or in any of your classes might know somebody that knows exactly how to help you. Okay. And once you're starting with a family member or a professional or a professor or a mentor, you're going to ask to conduct an informational interview. Okay. Which again is going to be your last assignment for this class. Okay. We're not going to do a final. We're going to do this. Okay. Okay. So let's talk about the informational interview. Sometimes even in the name, this sounds very intimidating. An informational interview. It has like a je ne sais quoi about it, right? It just means an information conversation, right? Don't let the name scare you or intimidate you. We're just having a conversation, right? And we do this in order to gather information about a career that you might have some interest in, okay? It is not to be super duper formal. It is not to be intimidated by. It is not to be stuffy. It's really an opportunity for you to learn a little bit about what you need to learn so you can make a really good, sound, informed decision about whatever major or whatever career that you choose. Because the last thing I want you to do is to end up doing all of this work at Chaffey College or wherever else you transfer to get into a field, get there and be like, man, probably should have asked some questions. This sucks, right? Let's do that work on the front end so we don't have to pay for it on the back end, okay? So some potential benefits from an informational interview. There's tons, but let's just talk about some of the ones that I got here, okay? First, the interviewee, the person that you're interviewing, is going to get to learn about you a little bit, a potential colleague or hire. This is what I was saying about the barbecue and the cauliflower steak thing, right? If an opportunity arises at that person's place of employment, they're going to think about that interaction that they had with you. And this could lead to them maybe reaching out and letting you know that there is an opportunity to be hired or maybe an opportunity for an internship. Okay? So let's not lose that opportunity. Let's eat that cauliflower steak and let's get this opportunity. Okay? We're going to do 2 of these things at the barbecue. It's just going to happen. Okay? I already mentioned this as well, that you might have an opportunity to discover some employment opportunities that might not be advertised, right? When there is a job at Chaffey College, for example, oftentimes people that work at Chaffey College know about the job before everybody else does, right? And you might have an opportunity to be like, hey, there's this thing coming up. You might want to get your resume ready, right? So you might have an opportunity to learn about an employment opportunity or an internship opportunity or a volunteer opportunity that might not be advertised to everybody. It might be like something that's a little bit more within, okay? It also gives you an opportunity to explore majors and careers, right? This is a form of exploration. There's only so much that you're going to be able to learn when you're looking at Google or when you're looking on whatever search engine that you're looking at or whatever YouTube video, right? Oftentimes what you're not going to hear about is the day-to-day, right? Hey, I was able to read this online and I have an idea about what teachers do, but like, what is it like being a teacher? What is your everyday like? What are some of the things that I can't research that I really got to know it before I make this decision about whether or not to be a teacher, right? You're going to get to learn about some of those things in an informational interview, if that's something that you want to ask, right? Because you have the opportunity to ask whatever questions you do or don't want to ask, okay? It also gives you an opportunity to start building some confidence for future interviews, right? We're going to talk about interviews in this class, as we get closer to the end of the class, but interviews can be difficult, right? They can be nerve-wracking, right? You might feel like you don't get the words out the way that you want to, that maybe you're moving your hands too much and you're looking like you're trying to fight your interviewer, right? But this gives you an opportunity to build some confidence for future interviews. Oh, I've already done this before. Okay, I've done this before. I've been the one asking the questions. I know how to answer because I've seen people do it when I ask them, right? You also get, you can't see because my big face is in the way again, but identify how your personality and your strengths may fit the major or the career. That's what's kind of behind it, okay? You guys are already doing this work. You're looking at the MBTI. You're looking at the Strong. Based on what you're looking at, you're saying, well, this might work for me. This might not work for me based on my strengths and my personality and the things that I think I want out of a job, right? But when you get an opportunity to learn about the things that are not researchable, then you have another opportunity to be like, does this work for me? Is this going to work for me? This person said a couple of things to me that were really interesting that I hadn't considered. Is this going to work? Do I want to live like that? Right? Some of you had mentioned that even in your Strong, that you had researched a couple of careers and you thought they were interesting, but they didn't match the kind of lifestyle that you wanted. Right? Those are the connections that we got to make. Okay? And lastly, it gives us an opportunity to build our professional network. Right? Not only are we building that network that we're talking about, but they also may be able to serve as a professional or a potential reference for you later on down the road. So maybe they find you a leadership opportunity or a job opportunity or a volunteer opportunity, and you apply for it and you need a reference. Somebody needs to speak to your ability to be able to do the work that you applied for. This person could be one, right? You're building that network, right? Your professor could maybe be one. That family friend who works in the field could maybe be one. And this is why those informational interviews are super, super important. Okay. Now, we know that you all have an informational interview coming up. So let's talk about the steps for the informational interview so that you have an idea of what steps you might want to take in order to make sure that you find somebody and that you find somebody that's worth interviewing. Okay. That's not to say that everybody doesn't have something to offer you. But if you want to be a teacher, somebody that works in supply chain probably doesn't have a lot of good information to give you, right? So making sure that we find somebody that you can interview that's going to give you the information that you need. If you got to do this work anyways, and you got to go into what might be an uncomfortable situation for you and ask questions that you might not want to ask, let's get something out of it. Let's not waste this opportunity, right? So making sure that we find somebody worth interviewing so you can get answers to the questions that you have is critical. Okay. So the first thing we want to do is identify. We want to find the major career that we want to learn more about. Okay. I know some of you are in between 2 or 3 things. I want you to maybe pick the thing that you're leading with, right? What's the thing that's speaking to you the most that you feel like you know the least about? But if you knew a little bit more about, you could either marry this option or take this option off the list. Sometimes taking things off of your list is just as important as putting things on your list, right? So the first thing we want to do is identify. Let's figure out the major career that we think that we want to learn more about. And again, if you're in between, choose one, right? Choose the one that you think you know the least about or the one that you're most interested in so we can do this work, okay? The second thing we want you to do is research. I'm going to send you all in the module for this week a bunch of different links to a bunch of different career sites where you can do some research to learn a little bit more about the career of the major prior. Okay, I want you to go into this interview with a baseline level, a foundational level of knowledge in terms of what they do. I don't want you to go into an interview with a chemical engineer and be like, so what's a chemical engineer, right? I want you to go in with, hey, this is what I've learned about chemical engineering. Can you tell me how what you do is maybe similar or maybe different, right? That's the value, right? We can figure out what a chemical engineer does on our own. So while we have this person here to guide us, let's ask questions that we can't normally get the answer to just by using Google. Okay? Super important. We want to prepare, okay? We want to prepare. So we're going to create a list of questions that we think we want to ask during the interview. Now, in that informational interview worksheet that I put in the module for, I think, last week, that I will hand out to you all next week in person, on the back side, there are a long list of questions that you can ask. I'm going to encourage you to go through that list and maybe choose 7 to 10 questions that you think you absolutely want to get answered. Now, there might be a question that you have that is not on that list. Add it. That list is not an end-all be-all. That is not the holy grail for you to be like, I can only choose from here. If there are 2 or 3 questions that you absolutely need the answer to that you cannot find anywhere else and that do not live on that list, put it on your list. That is way more important than using it from this list that I've created. That list is really just to kind of get you going and start thinking about what questions you might want to ask. Okay? So we figured out the major career that we want to learn about. We've identified it. We've researched it. So we have a foundational base knowledge of what we're talking about. And then we're going to create a list of questions to ask the person that we're going to interview to get more information about this thing that we've already researched and identified. Okay? All right. Next, what we're going to do is that we're going to select somebody. So we're going to choose a person that is involved in the desired field that we want to interview. Okay? Got to find somebody. Okay? There's different ways that you can do that. If you have LinkedIn, use LinkedIn. If you don't have it, get it. Y'all on social media all day anyways. Might as well use it for something positive, right? So if you don't have LinkedIn, get it. I actually just helped a student get an informational interview, not a student in our class, but a student that I work with outside of just in general counseling. She had an interview with an industrial and organizational psychologist. I'm like, I don't even know what that is. And now she's getting an internship with them. Pretty sweet. Okay. So choose a person that's involved in the field that we want to interview. And the next, what we're going to do is that we're going to arrange. We're going to arrange a time to either meet with them. If you can meet with them in person and you are comfortable and you feel safe enough to do so, please do. Especially if it's somebody that you kind of know or a professor, that's fine. Otherwise, for safety purposes, I would encourage you all to lean on Zoom, right? If you're comfortable giving this person your number or they're comfortable giving you their number, you can do FaceTime. If it's a phone conversation, it's a phone conversation, but I really do prefer that you can see somebody. So if you're going to use Zoom, please allow them to see you, because all of that is going to help your interviewee determine what kind of candidate you might be for a potential position, right? That's hard to do when you're just hearing the voice. You got to be able to see somebody and see how they move and kind of, you know, see their mannerisms and see if this is somebody that would be a good fit for the office, right? Or whatever work environment. Okay, so after we choose somebody, let's set up an email or Zoom call. Again, if you feel comfortable enough, I don't want any of you going into somebody's house that you don't know. Don't go meet anybody somewhere nefarious. There's no problem to do this on Zoom. Okay. Lastly, conduct. Let's make sure that you are dressing appropriately to whatever it is, whatever interview you're going to, that you're arriving on time and that you remain professional. Okay. You are the arbiter of what appropriately means as it relates to your dress, right? But that doesn't necessarily mean that you have to go suited and booted, right? This is not a job interview. You're trying to get some information. But again, I want you to go to this meeting or at least in the Zoom, look as if you are trying to apply for the job that they might have. How would you conduct yourself, right? Arrive on time. If this was an interview that you had, you wouldn't go in flip-flops, right? You'd probably do your hair, right? You wouldn't go there with a big messy beard like I have right now, right? Be on time and remain professional as much as possible, okay? That one is always sometimes tricky because I want you to be able to answer in kind. And if somebody's being super informal, then I want you to be, you know, aware enough to make the decision to also be informal, okay? So you can answer in kind, but again, nobody will ever fault you for remaining professional, okay? And lastly, but surely not leastly, make sure you follow up. Okay. Follow up with that person after the interview. Send a follow-up email saying, hey, this is so and so from the informational interviewer from Chaffey College. I just really want to thank you again for your time. And best of luck in the future. Hopefully we have an opportunity to talk later. Okay. And make sure that you're recording your answers. Okay. Make sure that when you're asking the question, you're writing down what the answers are, because you need to put those answers not only in your paper, but you want to remember those answers. That's why you're asking them, right? If you're going to record somebody using like your phone, make sure you ask for permission. You are not allowed to just record somebody without asking. Okay. But that might help you from your hand falling off and taking, rigorous notes the entire time. Okay. We're going to identify, we're going to do our own research, we're going to prepare a list of questions, we're going to find somebody to interview, we're going to set that interview up, we're going to go to that interview dressed appropriately, arriving on time, being professional, we're going to record all our answers, and then afterwards, when we get back home, we're going to send an email saying, thank you for making the time. Okay? And hopefully what you'll find is that this is a positive enough experience that you'll do this again and again and again as you find people in other areas that you want to interview. Okay. Okay. Volunteering. Volunteering is also a really great way to expose yourself to career. Okay. You can't necessarily do it with everything. I know a lot of folks who are in like health services or want to maybe do something like psychology or any of those helping professions. This can be really tough if you don't have a license. But if there's any opportunity for you to volunteer in any capacity, it's a great way to expose yourself to a career. It's also another great way to build your network and your resume. One of the great things about volunteering is that your resume doesn't care if you do 40 hours a week or 40 minutes a week, right? It still goes on your resume. So if you have the time in your very busy lives to volunteer, do it. It's a way to build your network. It's a way to build your resume. It's also a way to get additional references, right? People that work in the field that can vouch on your ability to also work in the field. Okay. The other great thing about volunteer opportunities is that they're usually really flexible with your school. They're usually super flexible with work, super flexible with school, because they know you are not here getting paid. You're doing this out of, either the goodness of your heart or because you're trying to get something out of it, because you're trying to get that experience. But either way, because they're not compensating you in money, they're usually really flexible with your time and what your schedule might look like. Okay. So please consider that if you are looking for another way to just either expose yourself to an opportunity or build your resume, right? If you haven't done you don't have a lot of work experience and you got a lot of white space on your resume, this is a great way to get rid of some of that white space, okay? Internships are also a great opportunity, right? To build that resume, get that experience, either paid or unpaid. Again, your resume doesn't necessarily care what you do. Your bank account might care which one you do, but your resume doesn't necessarily care which one you do. Okay, but it's a great opportunity to just kind of get your feet wet, see if this is even the right thing for you, right? Sometimes there's only so much that you can learn in an informational interview. Sometimes there's only so much that you can learn from a volunteer experience. Sometimes you need to get in there and get your hands dirty. Okay. Oftentimes these internships are going to be supervised by a professional, right? Or they might be supervised by a professor, also building your network, also building the capacity for you to get reference letters, right? Letters of recommendation. Okay. There's a bunch of different ways to find these internships. You can look online. I know internships.com is a great site, and it's a super comprehensive site to be able to do this work. You can also go to our Career Center. Okay. You can go to speak with people in our Career Center, and they will help you to find some internships, paid or unpaid, or volunteer opportunities that are aligned with the career or the major that you were looking at. Okay. Another great thing about internships is that they have the ability to count for college credit. Okay. There's an opportunity for them to count as college credit where you can get 1 or 2 units towards the 60 units that you need for your degree using the internship. So if there's something that you're really, really interested in, go to the Career Center. Let's see if we can find something, and you can do that internship instead of having to do an additional class. Okay. Super, super great opportunity for you all. Okay. Now, That's really about networking. That's really about the informational interview. I hope this has clarified what this assignment is for you. Our last few slides are really going to be about values, and that's what the homework is going to be for this week. At the end of this, you guys are going to have a values assessment. You're going to write me a values reflection, the same thing, same format as the Strong, same format as the MBTI. Okay. So, as it relates to confirming our core values and strengthening our balance, right? When we're talking about values, I want you to take a second, just wherever you're watching this, and just think about or write it down. How do you define values? Okay. How do you define values? Is it something that is physical? Right? You value this watch. I value this piece of jewelry. I value my home. I value my car. I value my Netflix subscription. Somebody wrote that one time. Like, one of the things that I value is my subscription to Netflix. I was like, damn, that's it? I mean, I value mine too, but it's not like my top three, you know? What are three things that you value in your life? So three things, three people, three ideas, right? Values can even be like an idea, like honesty, loyalty, right? So what are three things that you value in your life? I also want you to think about what are three things that you think people value in you, right? Are you dependable? Are you flexible? Are you positive? And then lastly, what are three things, I missed the three in there, but you know what I mean. What are three things that you would like your employer to value? Okay, so how do you define values? Three things that you value in your life. Three things that you think people value in you. And three things that you think you would want your employer to value. The person that you work for, what do you want them, if you're going to work for somebody? I know some of you want to be entrepreneurs, but if you're going to work for somebody, what are three things that you want that person to value? Okay. As you do that, I'm going to keep it moving. So, as we operationally define values in this class for this assignment, really what we're talking about with values are forces that guide and influence your decisions throughout your life. Okay. In this sense, when we're talking about values as it relates to career exploration and major exploration, we're not necessarily talking about physical things, right? We're talking about these like invisible things, these forces that guide and influence the decisions that you make, right? I can't do that because it doesn't align with my values in here or my values in here, right? I can't work at a place that does this, because it doesn't align with my values, okay? Values can also be things or ideas or concepts that are important to you, right? Things, idea, or concepts. I can't work for a company that doesn't give maternity or paternity leave. It's obviously not something that's important to them. It's important to me. Can't do it. I can't work in a field that does XYZ because it's not important to them. Okay. And lastly, the way that we're going to operationally define values for this assignment, we're going to call them deeply held convictions that influence your thinking when you are faced with choices. So when you have a hard decision to make, what are the values that you go back on? You'd be like, well, wait a minute. What am I about? Who am I? Who do I want to be? What am I about? And is this decision that I'm going to make aligned with those things? Okay. Oftentimes when we talk about work, we talk about all kinds of other things, but we don't talk about this. We talk about how careers and majors align with our personality and with our interests, but do they align with your values? Do they align with your values? Okay. And lastly, self-motivating factors. Okay. Values often serve as self-motivating factors. Okay. Now, when we're talking about needs and motivators, your inner drive, your needs, and your motivations also influence how you might choose a career. Okay. Your personality will, your interests likely will, your values will, but so will your inner drive, your needs, and your motivations, right? When we're talking about these can really be a wide spectrum, right? These will really progress from the most basic needs to the more complex needs, right? Some of us mentioned in the beginning of the year, beginning of the semester, I need a job that pays 6 figures because it needs to support the kind of lifestyle that I want. I want to have this in my life, right? So you have a drive to go get those things. That's also a need and a motivation for you to do whatever work that you need to do to go achieve those things, right? So these can be the most basic needs where some of us say, hey, look, I just need a roof over my head, some clean water, and some good food, and I'll be fine. Some of us might say, no, 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 no. I need a garage that has 17 cars in it, and I need X, Y, and Z. So they can be the most basic needs to the more complex needs. Okay? So basic needs maybe just being like food, water, and shelter, and you're okay with that. As we get more complex, they can even include, they don't have to, and this doesn't mean that this is also a complex need, but they can even include things like status, fame, money. Those things might be important to us. Those might be things that we value. Not right or wrong, but they just might be things that we value. Okay? Oftentimes, what happens is that we become aware of the higher order of needs after the lower order needs have been met. Right? So we might say all we need is food, water, shelter until we get food, water, and shelter. We might be like, now that I have food, water, and shelter, food, water, and shelter might not be enough. I think I might need some more. Right? So oftentimes we don't become aware of the things that are higher on that list until things that are lower on that list have already been met. Right? Furthermore, sometimes our values can change after our needs are met. Right? Now, sometimes your values can change just as you grow. Right? What you valued at 5 years old is probably not the things that you value now. And so if that's true, the things that you value now might not be as valuable to you 10 years from now, 15 years from now, maybe when your circumstances have changed. Maybe you have a family and now your values have changed. Things that weren't once important to you are less important to you because other things have taken its place. Okay? Now, not to turn into your psychology professor, but when we talk about like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, this is kind of what I mean about the higher order of needs usually don't get fulfilled until the lower order is fulfilled first, right? So if we're talking about our psychological needs at the very bottom, our most basic needs, air, water, food, shelter, sleep, clothing, and when we talk about reproduction, we're really talking about love, right? The ability to love, right? Once we could look at this list and be like, that seems like a pretty comprehensive list. I think if I had that, I'd be all right. And once you get that, then you can maybe start worrying about your safety needs. But you can't get to your safety needs until your physiological needs are met. Okay? So your safety needs, you have a little personal security, you got a job, you got some resources, you have your health, you have health insurance, maybe you got a little place to live, right? A little property. Once you have those needs met, you're able to move up that hierarchy of needs. Okay? So when we're talking about the higher order of needs, oftentimes the highest order of needs cannot be met without the lower ones being met first. Hard to go from physiological needs right to esteem. Okay? Okay. Now, lastly, finding balance. What we're really trying to do with all of this career exploration is to try to find a way to include all of your priorities and your values into your career, into your life plan. Right? How do we take all of the pieces of you, all of the things that make up you, and find a career that kind of caters to all of those things you are, your personality, your interest, your values, your needs, your desires, right? How do we find all of those things and kind of like create a Venn diagram of all those things and find something that lives right in the middle? Okay? If we can do that, we've really found balance. We've really found balance. It doesn't mean that there aren't other ways to do that, but if we can do this, we've really had an opportunity to find balance. Okay? It's also about identifying what makes you happy and how, when we identify what makes you happy, we can identify similar careers that might also make you happy. A lot of you talked about this in the Strong, and I really, really loved it when you said, it feels good to help others. I feel really good when I'm helping others. Okay, how do we find you a career where you have an opportunity to help others? Is there a way that you can help others, get paid for it, have all of those needs met, have your values met, have your personality kind of be adjacent to that job, something that you're interested in, and get paid for it? Is there a way to make all of those things work in the middle? Can they all meet in the middle? Right? A lot of us talked about that. It feels good to be able to do this. Is there a career that we can find where you can do that thing that feels good? Okay. Identifying ways to incorporate your interests into your work or your personal time can help you sharpen the saw. Okay. When I talk about sharpening the saw, really what I'm talking about is keeping yourself sharp, doing the things that make you feel good. Right? Sometimes what you'll find is that not everybody in the universe has an opportunity to do something that they absolutely love. But if you can find something that you like, then on the side, you can do the things that you love. So let's say you want to be a musician and you're just not able to find or make enough money as a musician to live the kind of lifestyle you want. But you become a music teacher, but you still get to make music on the side. Maybe like Saturdays you go to the local restaurant down the way and you get to play music for folks on Saturday. Maybe that's enough for you. Maybe your friends come over on a Saturday and you just get to like jam out in your basement if you got a basement or something, right? Maybe that's an opportunity for you to still do the things that you're interested in without that one thing being, or that you're passionate about, without that one thing being your actual career. If you're a painter, right? Maybe you don't become Banksy or Picasso, but maybe painting on the weekends is enough for you, right? Maybe you work in a bank during the week, but painting on the weekend still gives you the ability to do the things that you're interested in and sharpen your saw, right? Because sometimes what happens is that leisure activities can help counteract the negative effects of the stress that are associated with work, right? I played basketball in college. I obviously didn't make it to the NBA. But when I was coaching at the community college level, that felt good. That was enough basketball for me. I didn't need to be around basketball every single day, right? And as I got older, my values changed. The things I was interested in changed. Now I just watch it on the weekend if the game's on, right? So the thing that you're passionate about doesn't always have to be the thing that you use as your major or you use as your career. There's an opportunity for you to do something else that you're equally good at that maybe you don't love as much, but you like. And then on the side, you can do something in a more leisurely environment related to what you love. And maybe that's enough for you, right? So really trying to find that balance. It's not necessarily something you have to do every day. I told you all the other a couple of weeks ago, I really enjoy cooking. I love it. But I'm not about to be out here cooking for 500 people at a restaurant. I don't want to be a chef. In this house, I'm a chef. But I don't want to be a chef at a restaurant, right? So when I get an opportunity to cook at home, that's enough for me, right? That's enough for me. Is that going to be enough for you? Depending on what you choose. Okay. These are the conversations that I want you to start having with yourself. These are the ways in which I want you to start thinking about this. Okay. So for this week, you will have a values assessment. I want you to go through that assessment. It will challenge you. You likely all have a very long list of values. This is going to ask you to really be mindful and narrow it down. You say that these 15, 20, 30 things are things that you value. What are your top 5 of that list? It's going to be a bit of a difficult activity. And then I want you to follow the prompts, get that reflection in, same as always, double space, Times New Roman, 12 font. And please, please, please try to get this in by Saturday at midnight. Okay. Have a great week. Stay dry. And we will see you all next Tuesday in class. Take care.